Hello, and welcome to the Subvet Podcast, attempting to merge neuroscience with sock puppets.
Are we recording? Are we doing this?
Hey everybody, welcome to the podcast. Welcome as always to the Subvert Podcast. I'm Aaron Stewart, and this, as always, is the lovely Kristin and Aaron.
Hello.
Thank you for joining us, and boy, we got a great episode for you today, I tell you.
Well, we think it's great.
Yeah.
Hopefully you do too.
Yeah, well, we'll finally explain, we go into the developments in the adolescent brain that have been moving forward in the past little while here, and the joys of brain scans now, where instead of having to, jab needles into each other's brains, we can actually...
Yeah. As much fun as that is.
It is loads of fun, and I mean, anybody that has that as a hobby,
I admire anybody that
I don't
has
want
a
to, right?
hobby.
I mean, I don't want to get in the way of your, with your little slice of joy, I guess. I don't know.
Just make sure you have consent.
Well, that's
let's
one of
in
those.
no
Yeah,
way
brain
try and
surgery.
encourage
Brain
people to
surgery is
experimental.
relatively painless, I guess. Anyway,
Before we get into more trouble here,
before we contemplate more brain surgery, we'll talk about the recent discovery by researchers in apparently why teenagers' brains don't respond to their parents anymore. And I've been through this. It was one of those kind of, and it's kind of an almost overnight kind of thing where this child that loved you and wanted to be around you and looked up to you now suddenly doesn't want anything to do with you, doesn't listen to a word you say, and just goes off on their own path. And for a lot of parents, it's rough, right? Because you're just not prepared for it, But now they've apparently found that they can actually tell a child's age by looking at their brain scans and having the child listen to their mother's voice.
What do you mean? What does that tell them?
Well, basically, at about 13, so for up until 12, everything in a child's life kind of revolves around parents and that kind of social construct and everything that makes you feel safe and comfortable, and you need to have that, right, in order to kind of develop that. At 13, apparently the brain switches, and now everything that was comforting now becomes discomforting. And essentially it pushes you away from all of those things in order to push you out into a social context with the rest of the world, right? So it literally, they said that they could tell how old they were because when they're listening to their mother's voice at 13, their brain literally doesn't register it.
Ah.
Right? Whereas novel voices, other conversations, other people's voices makes their brain light up in the same way that those things that when they were 12 used to react to their mothers and fathers in these safe places, voices. And so, yeah, it was very striking, they said, where they could see this definitive line as to how old the child was because this brain development happens at that time. And this is just what happens to every adolescent as they cross into.
So that is the true mark of adolescence in a way then, is the separation from seeing your parents as your savior, your safe place, and a push towards interacting with the rest of the world.
Yep. Which, as a parent, again, you see this as a rejection of you.
Well, yeah,
right?
Sure.
And everybody, like, yesterday you loved this. What are you talking about? Everything that we were doing, you said just yesterday you said this was your favorite thing ever,
Yeah.
right? And now suddenly it's, I don't want to do that anymore. I want to go do something. Like my friends are now, right? Like, and now they want to go out and socialize with other people, and they want to just get away from you as much as possible. And like I said, it's tough for a lot of parents having to deal with that, supposed rejection. But now that we at least have the physiological mechanisms behind this, hopefully it'll make it a lot easier for parents to kind of see, they turn 13 and lo and behold, right? And may not make it at least, easier, but at least gives you a reasoning for it and some sort of, sense of calm, hopefully, that this is a normal procedure and it means they're actually healthy and developing as they should.
Well, it's an interesting, anytime we have this research that kind of explains or gives us a context as to why we do the things that we do, and then it's an opportunity to how can we actually move forward, how can we engender growth in this adolescent individual, knowing that this is what's actually happening inside of their heads.
Absolutely.
Right? So the first thought that I had was, could it potentially then be harmful, the parents reacting in a totally normal way of, why don't they love me? Why are they pushing me away? And they tend to kind of double down then, You know,
Yep.
at least I know my mom did for sure when I went through teenage
Absolutely.
rebellion. You know, you love me.
Yeah. Which pushes
could
them away
that-
further.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
yeah. So, in what way could a parent then help their child on this process of learning while still making sure that the kid knows that they are still a safe space?
And I mean, I would say that this probably comes down to a matter of trust, right? I mean, if you can just, like, again, this is something that's a natural thing. It's supposed to happen. They are supposed to push you away and go look for novel experiences, right? So what you want to try to do, as far as I'm concerned, at least, you know, in my limited knowledge of this thing, is try to give them that safe space, to let them explore, to let them go and be themselves, to try out the new things, to let their brains really expand into this new person they're trying to be, and just trust that in the end of the day, they're still going to come back to you and say that they love you and that they want to be, you know, with you, even if it's tough at this point for them to admit it. You know, and it is, and that's again like a physiological feature of the brain where it makes it tough. It makes it so that they don't want to be in their safe space anymore. It pushes them out of that. You know, which, you know, is again just going to have to come down to trust. You're going to have to trust that the spaces they want to get into, right?
Yeah.
Are at least safe for them to explore.
Well, an evolutionary thinking about that, it makes sense because back in the day, that would be considered the age of majority. You know, like when you're 13, that was it. You were pretty much an adult and you were, you know, out in the world. Girls were getting knocked up. They were married and popping out babies. Maybe their second one by that point.
Well, I mean, if you
know,
go back
like,
even further, if you go back to like the cave days, right? Like that was when you would leave the cave.
Yeah.
Right?
Well, yeah.
And
now
so
you need to go hunt.
And so your brain would have to force you into making this a comfortable situation instead of it being something that your brain goes, no, I want to stay here. I'm safe here.
Yeah.
Right? It forced you to leave the cave and go searching for a different type of mate because that genetically works better for our DNA, right? Like you need that diversity or else you kind of, right, fall into this pit of, right? And a lot of places are, you know, if you live on an island, you need these people coming in, right, to diversify the genetics, or else you get all sorts of issues cropping up.
So then going back to the ideas, if you are suppressing words, if you're suppressing that in your child, let's say, right? If you're being overprotective, because let's face it, I mean, like the world is a very scary place right now. Nobody really knows what's going on and what your kid's going to fall prey to, you know, especially with, you know, the internet, and you have no idea what your kid is being told. And it's very natural, I would think, for a parent to just want to protect your child from anything and everything that could harm it. But if you are overly protecting your child, then let's use that cave analogy, right? If you are locking your kid away in this cave, could that be having potential consequences? And could this be an explanation to types of behavior that we're seeing now?
Absolutely. Right. Because again, if you're trying to push away and they keep trying to hold on, right, it's just going to make you want to push away further.
Yeah. I mean, I was thinking entitlement culture, which is a big thing that we see now, particularly within like a millennial generation, particularly within this in a lot of ways. And could that be a direct product of overprotection, of not having that space to be able to fully explore your surroundings because your parents were doing, I mean, the right thing, trying to protect you and trying to teach you right from wrong, but not letting you interact with the world, to the sense that you've now been in this cave psychologically for too long that you've expected things to come into you rather than you having to go out and get them. I don't know whether this is true or not. I'm just...
Well, and this is where, you know, up until now, it had all been just kind of speculation, right?
Yeah.
We had never actually had any kind of brain scans, any actual data to show why this was happening. And so we're still trying to interpret what that means. And every person's different. It's just more that there's actually these biological markers now that we can now point to as to why these behavioral changes happen. And you know, the idea that, you know, you kind of have to just let it happen, right? And that's the hard part about this, right? Where, you know, it doesn't mean that they don't love you. It doesn't mean that they're never going to come back home. It doesn't mean that they're going to, you know, leave you entirely. And that's, again, where this trust thing comes in, where you have to trust that they're going to come back, because not trusting them makes it harder for them. you know?
Yeah.
But I think in terms of the entitlement, I think the problem there is that what we have now is like when they hit that age, you don't want to say no to them anymore because that pushes them away too, right?
Yeah,
and I think that leads to a lot of these entitlement issues where you feel that you're supposed to have this thing because mom gave it to me all this time, you know? But I also see kind of the flip side of it where, you know, if you were born into, like, this generation is in a completely different situation than even I was, where I saw the cracks, you know, in the system when I got into this thing, where my mom said, if you just put your nose down and you just go to school and you just work, they'll take care of you and everything will be good and it'll all work out and you'll be able to go and get your house and you'll be able to have all these things that we had that'll all be yours. And I looked out into the world and I kind of went, are you sure, Mom? Are you, like, because I mean, I see a lot of, like, he just got fired. He worked there for 25 years, and they were just like, see ya! And he was just like, well, what about? And they were like, nope. And we were like, but wait a minute. And so I saw too much of that going on to really trust that thing. And now the kids today are in an even worse situation where, you know, there's just no, like, what do? Go to college and accrue $100,000 worth of debt to be able to, and now there's students who, you know, despite making payments on their loans, are still further behind than when they started. So how does this,
well, it's still being pushed though, and it's, you know, it still angers me a lot that is the overarching narrative, is like, you're not working hard enough.
And that's exactly the problem.
Right? Like, just keep working and you'll be able to get these things. And it's simply not true.
And this is where anytime I hear someone talking about entitlement, I kind of have to push back a little bit on that and kind of go, yeah, but they were told. We were sold this bill. Yeah. Right? Like, my entire life, I've just been, you know, like, just go to work and it'll all work out. And I just keep going, well, what? You know? Yeah. And I keep watching those people who go to work have it all taken away, you know, over things that they have no control over. And I just went, well, what? That doesn't, you know? And they spend all their time saving and having and you know, doing everything right and making sure that all their stuff was, and then it still just was stripped away. You know, and it just really, you know, I can totally understand how kids nowadays have been watching this for generations now, and the older people keep going, oh, it'll get better. Don't worry about it. It'll fix itself. It's totally.
And we're all sitting there watching it, like, it's not getting better.
They're sitting there in their houses, going, oh, don't worry, guys, it'll get better. And we're going, when you die and we get to do something with your space, like, what is, you know? And so again, it's now been generations of, and it just now inflation is woof, and now we get to blame the people who are trying to fix this as opposed to the ones that started it in the first place. And I'm just going, what is, you know? And the world is, and gas is, and now it's, and there's war, and now it's, you know.
Yeah.
And so, like you said, safe spaces are hard to find nowadays.
Yeah.
You know, which makes it, you know, understandable why most parents would want to just hold on as tight as possible. Yeah. Right? I got you. You know.
And I think to tie it kind of back into it, it's a projection, which is totally natural for a parent to project onto their child what they want for that child, or what they want that child to be. But if you're doing that only from your own sense of perception of the world, your own reality,
absolutely,
it's actually very unfair. And this is kind of how we've ended up here, is, you know, like, parents and older generations are projecting onto everyone that comes after them what worked for them. And it doesn't mean that they're horrible people or they're ignorant or anything like that. For them, it's perfectly natural to say, pull yourself up by your bootstraps and just get another job. And it's the avocado toast that you're buying, you know? And to them, that's an explanation. And they're saying, okay, yeah, I project onto you. You're simply not working hard enough. Whereas other generations see the world differently. Our reality is separate. And what needs to now, I think, be taught and widely accepted by everyone is that perception is vastly different. Obviously, between just individual to individual, but if we can even accept this at a generational level, it now gives us a starting point to be able to talk to fix things. You know, be like, okay, yeah, Grandpa, that's great. I'm so happy that worked for you. I can take this advice, integrate it, but you need to be willing to listen that the problems today are not the problems of your generation. You know, me getting a fourth job is not going to help.
Considering that, back in the day, you could work at a retail position and put your kid through college.
Yeah.
Like this is the part that they just don't seem to grasp anymore, that there used to be opportunities that just aren't available anymore. And part of that, unfortunately, is them accruing their wealth. Right? And a good portion of it is tucked away and stashed aside, and that's the reason why we can't get a lot of this stuff done. Which makes it really frustrating to hear these, if you guys just pull up by the bootstraps, like you were saying, like it's just, and I look at my son and I just go, I can't even say that to you, right? Like I'm trying to instill in him the idea that, you only get what you get, unfortunately, and you kind of have to just be happy with that. Which is just rough.
And work within that. Yeah. I mean, and every generation has the same thing, like we look at our parents and our grandparents as like, they had it so easy, they could work minimum wage and look at the house they could buy. But you know what? For them, when they were going through it, it was probably the hardest time ever. And they had reasons to complain. And
when they looked at their great-grandparents who lived in literally a mud hovel.
Yeah.
And this is paradise compared to that. And it's the same thing, right? Like realistically, this is a hole that we've dug ourselves into that we can hopefully pull ourselves out of, because I think that we're, the cracks in the foundation, are really showing now, and unfortunately nature is going to make changes for us if we're not willing to start doing some of these things now. So, it becomes a problem of, I think we just need to reframe this whole argument, instead of, again, at 13, you're going to have a push away from, and what we need to try to find is again, things that you can push into, that'll give you the opportunity to grow into something, recognizing that a lot of that is going to be marked with failure. Which was another thing that, the older generation doesn't quite grasp the idea of accepting failure as something that you can actually grow from, right? Like they're we don't say sorry kind of generation, right? Where they just do their thing, and then if you don't like it, well, that's just the way things are, right? Which makes it really tough for a generation that's trying to, fit into a different kind of framework where, no, there's some blame to be thrown around here, right? Like there's some things that happened that we need to actually just address, because we shouldn't be held responsible for trying to fix a lot of this shit that you guys started, like this climate thing, like the idea that we're still subsidizing oil companies, the idea that the gas prices are so high, and at no point will these companies give us a break. Like we have to literally wait for our government to force to make changes to try to, and now we have to, like, literally again, all these things that was just like, you can just drive your car to work, no problem, man. Now it's oh, wait a minute, there's a problem there, and we had propped ourselves up with all of these, various things now that are starting to get kicked out from under us.
Yeah. Well, and it's just being allowed the opportunity to come together to fix it. And I think that's the problem that is where we're at now. And to try and tie it back all in together in a neat little package, not allowing people the right to go and explore in their own way and to create their own reality with peers. Right. And I think that's the trouble where we're at, is we now have different generations, and we've got one generation that's trying to suppress the rest of them, by you have to work within this framework. It's in a certain sense.
It's a couple of generations.
You know what I mean? Sure. So I think that's where it needs to start, is let's be accepting of people needing to explore within their peers to come up with solutions, and to let go of your egos. Yes, okay, good job, boomers. You built a lot of really good stuff, and you know what? It served us really well for a very long time, but it's not working anymore. And actually, a lot of it has turned out to be quite harmful. So can we maybe just be willing to drop it and say, okay, what do you got, other generations? You've got some better ideas. We are open to listening. We don't need to be so attached to this thing that we built that was wonderful. It's a good thing to say, served us well. Thank you. Gratitude. Let it go. in hopes of building something better. Or better yet, letting your children and your grandchildren and your great-grandchildren have the opportunity to know what it feels like to build something that serves humanity, right? Instead of having to rely on the stuff you built because your ego's too big for it.
Yep. That is a great point.
Yeah.
Well, and that's, that's the thing is that, all of these, climate reports, all of these things that we keep, crime rates, all this stuff, all are kind of predicated on what we've done before.
Yeah. That's something we talk about a lot on the show. It's, not being adherent to these old ways of doing things. They were great. They worked. Sometimes they stop working. Sometimes
there's just so many new technologies, so many reasons to be hopeful that we can actually move away from this harmful, cycle that we've built for ourselves, right? Mm. There's so many things on the very, very close horizon that really do give hope for us getting out of this situation. But unfortunately, it's these entrenched interests that are going to hold us back, right? And we need to really start focusing on how do we, move this conversation forward? How do we bring grandpa into this conversation of how do we, solar panel your house?
Yeah.
Right?
Well, just let go, grandpa. Not in the more mortal sense. That sounded pretty bad.
Just let go. Just let go. And on that note, yeah, I think that's a good point to just let go. Just let go, man. Yeah. Just let go.
Everything's just getting very messy because it's trying to stick within existing ideologies that no longer serve.
From thousands of years ago at times.
So let go.
Let go. Just let it go, man. Let it go.
Let it go. Be willing to.
And the kids are going to do their thing, and it's going to look uncomfortable for you, and sometimes they may stub their toe, they may break a finger every once in a while, or worse. But in the end, the moving forward is what matters, and trying to hold them back. And then this analogy we're trying to apply on a grander scale here, right? Of just, let us move forward because we can, and we're going to have to, because what we've been doing is not helping,
Yeah.
Yeah.
So let us know what you think about this. Obviously, we covered a lot of different topics kind of within that discussion.
Yeah, as we do.
As always, yeah.
This is the joys of conversations, hey?
Exactly. We never know where we're going to end up.
Yeah.
But yeah, we'd love to hear from you. Let us know what you think on this topic. Let us know how you think we could better talk to one another, and bridge these generational gaps in ideology. If you have ideas for it, then this is how it begins, right? Get these conversations going. So hit us up in the comments below. Make sure to hit subscribe if you haven't already. How dare you? It offends us. Every person that watches without subscribing, I shed a tear. Follow us on socials, Facebook, Twitter, Insta, TikTok.
We're everywhere.
Yeah, we're places at the Subvert Pod.
Did this knowledge make your life with your teenager any easier? Right? Like, does this actually give you a little bit of okay. Right? Like, let us know, right? We'd love to hear that. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Well, thanks for joining us once again, and we will see you next time. Bye-bye.